Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
If you had asked me what moment in my life felt like a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from, I would have told you about my parents' 25th anniversary dinner, the night that felt like getting slapped across the face in front of a crowd. Only the slap was emotional, and the crowd was my entire extended family, all dressed in their Sunday best, pretending they didn't hear what just got said out loud. It was one of those catered suburban dinners, the kind that tries to look classy with fairy lights and wine glasses that clink like they matter, but underneath all the polish, there's tension baked into every smile. My mom, Linda, wore her old wedding dress that she somehow still fit into, and Dad, Robert, was hamming it up like he was giving a retirement speech, soaking in every laugh and every toast like he was the mayor of this family. My two younger sisters, Kelsey and Brooke, were glowing like the golden children they always were, both of them clinking glasses with their husbands and whispering inside jokes I hadn't been part of since we were kids. The grandkids were running wild through the banquet hall, while I sat quietly at the edge of the main table, trying to pretend I wasn't already the odd one out. After dinner and the too-long slideshow of their early years, half of which I wasn't even born for, Dad stood up and tapped his fork against a champagne glass. Everyone went silent, that anticipatory hush like something big was about to drop. And sure enough, he delivered. He beamed at Mom, clutched her hand, then looked out at all of us and said, "We wanted this night to be special, but next week, it's about to get even better." He paused for effect, clearly loving the attention. "We've booked a trip. A full week in Hawaii. The whole family. Flights, hotels, everything's on us. Just a little celebration part two, with all of us together in paradise." Cheers broke out instantly. Kelsey shrieked like she'd just won the lottery. Brooke hugged her husband so hard he almost spilled his wine. The kids danced around like someone said the word Disney. I clapped along, genuinely happy for a second, thinking maybe I was included, maybe this was their way of saying I was part of the family after all. So I asked, smiling, trying to match the energy in the room, "What time are we flying out?" And then, with that same damn smile plastered across his face, my dad looked right at me and said the thing I will never forget until the day I die. "Oh, you're not coming. You're not part of this. You can stay and take care of all the kids." He said it like he was talking about the weather. No shame, no hesitation, just casually tossing me out of the group like I'd always been temporary. The air got sucked out of the room. You could hear silverware freeze midair. Brooke suddenly found her wine glass incredibly interesting. Kelsey looked at the table. Mom reached for her napkin like she had something in her eye. But no one said anything. Not one person spoke up for me. I felt my stomach cave in. I gave a laugh that sounded way too loud, way too fake, and said something like, "Oh, good one, Dad." He didn't even blink. He just moved on, turning to Kelsey and asking her if she still had that bright pink swimsuit from their last beach trip. I sat there, smiling through my teeth, nodding along like none of it mattered, while every cell in my body screamed. I felt like I was 16 again, grounded for a week for something Brooke did, or 21 and passed over for college tuition help while my sisters got their degrees paid for in full. This wasn't new. It was just the first time they said it out loud, in public, like it wasn't even worth hiding anymore. I stayed until the end. Helped stack chairs. Helped clean up. Took the leftovers and made plates for the kids. I even kissed Mom on the cheek goodnight, even though her face turned when I leaned in. I told myself I was being the bigger person. I told myself I didn't care. But when I got home, something snapped. I dug through my old drawers in the guest room, which used to be my childhood room before they turned it into a yoga studio, and found a pile of junk I'd left behind after college. Old photos, a dead iPod, a ratty notebook I used to write poetry in. And then, tucked between an envelope and a broken picture frame, I found a folded piece of paper that didn't belong. It was a birth certificate. My name, my birthday. But the names listed under Mother and Father were not Linda and Robert. It was like reading someone else's story, except it was mine. The last name on the mother's line was unfamiliar, something with an Eastern European ring to it. The father's name was scribbled in ink, but blacked out with a permanent marker, leaving just a faint outline of letters I couldn't make out. I sat on the floor of that room for over an hour, just staring at that paper, flipping it over, rereading it like the text might change. My hands were shaking. My stomach felt like it was falling through the floor. And all I could think, looping in my head, was that maybe I really wasn't one of them. Maybe I never had been. But if that was true, if I wasn't part of them, then who was I part of? And more importantly, why the hell had they never told me? Because if they didn't want me in their family, fine. But they were about to find out exactly what happens when you erase someone for too long and they finally wake up. I barely slept that night after finding the birth certificate, and when I did finally drift off sometime around 4 in the morning, I dreamed I was sitting at that dinner table again, only this time no one was speaking English, and every time I opened my mouth, sand poured out instead of words. I woke up with my throat tight and the sunrise stabbing through the blinds like it had something to prove. I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that this wasn't some random piece of paper misfiled in a drawer. It meant something. And whatever it meant, I wasn't going to get answers by sitting around waiting for my so-called parents to suddenly grow a conscience. So I started digging. Literally. I climbed up into the attic above the garage where my dad stored all the archival family stuff, which basically meant a bunch of dusty Rubbermaid tubs filled with half-melted Christmas decorations, old report cards, and the occasional dead mouse. I spent almost 3 hours opening every box labeled with names, trying to find one marked Emily or even miscellaneous kids. There were boxes with my sister's name scrawled in pink Sharpie, stuffed full of childhood photos, ballet recital programs, macaroni art preserved in Ziploc bags, and even tiny hospital bracelets with the date and time they were born. I finally found a small box wedged behind a broken vacuum cleaner, labeled in barely legible handwriting. Emily stuff, I think. Inside was my baby book, or rather, the ghost of one. Most of the pages were blank, except for a few half-hearted entries. There was a scribbled note under first words that said, Mama, with a question mark like someone wasn't sure, and no photos of me before the age of 2. No lock of hair, no hospital bracelet, no cards from well-wishers. Just one lone photo of a toddler that might have been me, sitting in a backyard I didn't recognize, wearing clothes that looked too big for a child that age. By contrast, Kelsey's baby book was a damn novel. Full-color photos on every page, little anecdotes about her first bath, her favorite lullabies, and pages upon pages of milestones. Brooke's was the same. Every tooth lost, every ear infection, every family holiday documented with the kind of detail you'd expect from someone writing a memoir. Mine? Mine looked like they'd just found me on the porch one day and figured they should write something down in case anyone asked. I stared at that blank baby book for a long time, flipping through the empty pages until I realized I was crying, not the loud kind, but the quiet, frustrated kind that feels like someone letting the air out of your chest with a slow leak. I felt like I was being erased in real time, like my entire childhood had been wiped with a damp cloth and no one even noticed. That evening, I took a drive over to Aunt Debbie's house. She was my dad's younger sister, the black sheep of the family, divorced twice, smoked menthols on the back porch, and had a habit of drinking boxed wine by the tumbler. She was also the only person in our family who'd ever treated me like an actual human being instead of a household appliance. I figured if anyone was going to talk, it'd be her. She didn't even act surprised to see me. Just raised an eyebrow, offered me a cigarette I didn't take, and poured me a glass of wine before I could even sit down. We talked for a while about surface-level stuff, work, traffic, whatever excuse I could make to delay asking the question that had been eating me alive all day. Finally, I just blurted it out. "Do you know anything about my birth certificate?" I asked, watching her face for any flicker of recognition. She took a long drag from her cigarette, tapped the ash into a cracked ceramic ashtray, and said, "So you found it, huh?" That one sentence hit me harder than any slap. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't pretend not to know. She just said it like she'd been waiting for the day I came around asking. You weren't supposed to be Linda's problem, she muttered, almost under her breath, like it wasn't a big deal. She never forgave your dad for it, you know. But he insisted, said it was the right thing to do. Said he wasn't gonna abandon his kid. Linda agreed, eventually. But she never treated you the same after that. I sat there, trying not to look completely gutted, nodding like I understood when I absolutely did not. So she's not my mom? I asked, my voice small and cracking at the edges. Debbie shrugged and poured herself another glass. Not biologically. But she raised you. That counts for something, doesn't it? I didn't answer. It didn't count. Not after being told I wasn't part of the family, like I was just some live-in babysitter with the same last name. When I got home, I ordered a DNA kit that same night. Swabbed my cheek, sealed the envelope, and sent it off without telling a soul. I kept my mouth shut. I played along. I smiled through the planning of the Hawaii trip, even offered to help coordinate travel times and keep the kids while the adults relaxed. Kelsey even joked that I'd finally found my role, like I was auditioning for the part of the dependable aunt in some Hallmark movie. The waiting almost drove me insane. The results were supposed to take 2 business days. But I got it back on Saturday, which was only 48 hours later. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the email before I took off my shoes. There it was in plain text. Linda, no biological match. My heart was racing. My hands went numb. I scrolled down to see Robert's results, but the system flagged it as inconclusive. Something about low-quality data or missing secondary markers, I don't know. The wording was confusing. But one thing was absolutely clear, Linda wasn't my mother. She never was. And suddenly everything made a sick kind of sense. The way she pulled away when I got close. The lack of memories, the blank baby book, the subtle digs, and cold shoulders. I wasn't part of her. I never had been. And now, the only question left was, who was I part of? Because if I wasn't hers, and I might not even be his, then who the hell am I? The days leading up to the Hawaii trip became a surreal parade of fake smiles and whispered logistics, like I'd fallen into some twisted sitcom where everyone pretended the family was whole, while underneath the surface everything was rotting. I was still playing my role as responsible oldest, helping coordinate luggage needs and allergy-friendly snacks for the grandkids, while on the inside, I was unraveling faster than anyone around me seemed to notice. But I didn't let it show. That was the trick. Keep smiling, keep nodding, keep playing the part they'd written for me, all while quietly rewriting the entire damn script. The DNA test results weren't definitive for Robert, but I had enough to move forward. The non-match with Linda was crystal clear, and that alone was enough to get legal traction. I booked a consultation with a local family lawyer, a sharp woman named Carmen who had the kind of calm intensity you'd expect from someone who's seen families implode over less. I didn't sugarcoat it when I explained the situation, laid out the birth certificate, the DNA results, and everything Aunt Debbie had said. Carmen leaned back in her chair, eyebrows arched, and after a long pause said, "It's not a clean case, but it's actionable. You've got every right to request your adoption records. And if there's fraud involved, we might even go deeper." I remember blinking when she said, "fraud," out loud, because up until that moment, I hadn't let myself use that word. I'd told myself this was just a messy family secret, something people do when they're scared or ashamed, not something criminal. But the more Carmen talked, the more it started to feel like maybe this wasn't just morally wrong, maybe it was legally twisted too. She helped me file the paperwork for the records and warned me it might take a few weeks. I didn't care. I had time. And I had patience, more than they thought I did. The next gut punch came from someone I didn't expect, my brother's wife, Megan. We'd never been particularly close, mostly because I always assumed she saw me the way the rest of the family did, as the extra, the filler, the one who was always there, but never really in. But one evening, while helping Kelsey pack for the trip, Megan pulled me aside in the hallway, her voice low and sharp like she'd been holding it in for years. "You're not crazy," she said, her eyes darting toward the living room to make sure no one heard. "Your parents, they've always called you the burden they couldn't give away." I heard them say it. More than once. It felt like the air got sucked out of my lungs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I just stood there, frozen in place, heart pounding like a drum in my chest while Megan, of all people, looked at me like I was a person for the first time. "You didn't imagine this," she added. "You've always been the outsider because they made you one. And if I were you, I'd burn it all down." I didn't tell Megan I already had the matches in hand. But I thanked her, genuinely. That night, I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 in the morning searching every possible record I could access. Newspaper birth announcements from the year I was born, hospital logs, public records, even combing through old local forum threads from back when message boards were still a thing. Eventually, I found something. A short article from the town paper dated just 2 weeks before my birthday. Local woman gives birth amid scandal. Father remains unnamed. The woman's name? Celeste Novak. The same last name that had been scribbled, barely legible, on that birth certificate I found in the drawer. The more I searched, the more the puzzle started to fit together. Celeste had lived in the same neighborhood as my parents back in the late 80s. She was 23 when she gave birth. Unmarried. The article suggested the father was known to the community but has requested privacy. My dad, Robert, was 26 at the time. Married. Newlywed. To Linda. I felt the heat rise in my chest as it all clicked into place. I wasn't some unwanted cousin or accidental adoption. I was the living, breathing proof of an affair they never wanted anyone to know about. My existence was the stain on their perfect little marriage, and Linda, cold and calculating, must have agreed to take me in under the guise of doing the right thing, when really, it was probably just to avoid scandal and shut people up. She raised me not out of love, but out of obligation and resentment. And Robert? He played house, played dad, played loyal husband while burying the evidence in the attic and rewriting my childhood with silence and half-truths. The thing was, I could have forgiven a lot. I could have forgiven the secrecy. I could have forgiven the coldness, maybe even the lies, if they just had the guts to tell me the truth. But instead, they decided to humiliate me in front of the entire family, to remind me once and for all that I was not one of them. That's when I stopped waiting for the truth to come out on its own and started planning how I'd drag it into the light myself. With 1 week to go until the big family send-off to Hawaii, I kept my head down, helped out, smiled for the photos, packed backpacks for the kids like the world's most helpful older sister. They had no idea. No one did. I called the airline 2 days before departure, pretending to be Linda. Used her date of birth, her frequent flyer number, everything I'd seen her use 100 times before. And with the right tone and a confident voice, I got through the security checks and made a single request. Cancel the return flights. Not for everyone, of course. I left the kids' tickets untouched, along with Megan's and Brooke's husband, who had always seemed halfway decent. But Robert and Linda? Kelsey and her smug, Reddit-scrolling husband? Their return flights disappeared like they were never booked. And when they tried to check in a week later and got told their seats were gone and the plane was full, they'd get their first real taste of being left behind. Funny how poetic that was. They thought I was just a babysitter. They forgot I was also their proof. And now I was something else entirely. Their reckoning. By the time the plane touched down in Honolulu, my entire plan was already in motion, and the first domino had fallen so smoothly that no one even noticed it was missing. I dropped them at the airport that morning with a smile so calm it scared even me, hugging the kids tightly, brushing off Linda's usual side glance as if it didn't leave a fresh bruise every time. They rolled their designer luggage toward the gate with the kind of smug entitlement you only earn after a lifetime of never facing real consequences. And I waved, all cheery and warm, as if I was the loyal daughter they thought I was still pretending to be. But I knew exactly what was coming, and I'll be honest, it wasn't even the revenge that made me feel powerful. It was the silence. The quiet power of knowing something they didn't, of holding the truth like a match in my pocket, knowing I could strike it any time I wanted and watch the whole damn thing burn. Back at home, I had the house to myself for the first time in years. Well, not exactly by myself, I had the kids. Kelsey and Brooke's children were still too young to travel that far without being glued to an iPad or demanding snacks every 3 minutes. So they'd stayed behind, left in my care like a favor to the family, though no one really asked me if I wanted to do it. And truthfully, I did. I loved those kids. They were innocent in all of this, untouched by the rot that had settled into the rest of the family like mold between bathroom tiles. I made their favorite pancakes. We played board games in the living room. We made blanket forts and watched old cartoons until way past bedtime. And for a few days, I actually felt something like peace until I remembered what needed to be done. While the kids were napping one afternoon, I pulled out the old photo albums I had collected over the past few weeks, what few pictures of me existed at all, and began piecing together a timeline. I scanned the empty baby book, the mysterious birth certificate, the sparse birthday photos, the dozens of school events I attended alone or with a babysitter while everyone else had matching Team Johnson shirts cheering from the bleachers. Then, I compiled them into a digital album with captions, unapologetically honest, cutting where they needed to be, and always anchored in fact. The final piece was the video clip. I had asked Megan, smartly, to record the anniversary dinner just in case something went sideways. She had caught the whole moment, my dad's voice loud and clear saying, "You're not coming. You're not part of this." The camera didn't shake. The audio didn't crack. It was all there, perfect and ugly, and it played like a short film directed by trauma itself. I uploaded everything to a private link. Then I wrote a message, short, simple, direct. This is my family. This is the truth. Do with it what you will. I shared it to the local community Facebook group where my mom used to brag about church bake sales and neighborhood cleanup efforts. I emailed it to the PDA listserv, sent it to a few people from high school who always wondered why I was the quiet one, and even texted the link to our old church pastor, who had once pulled me aside after Sunday school and whispered that sometimes God gives us more than we think we can handle. Within hours, it blew up. I wasn't trying to go viral, but apparently raw family dysfunction hits people harder than cute puppy videos, and by midnight, I was getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were apologetic, saying they never realized or always suspected something. Others were enraged on my behalf. But the best part? I heard nothing from Hawaii. Not a peep. I waited 2 more days before I sent the certified letter. I could have texted or emailed, sure, but I wanted Robert to open it with his own hands, to feel the weight of that envelope and wonder what was inside. I typed the note on my laptop, printed it on thick cardstock, and signed it in pen just to make it personal. 1 sentence. 11 words. I'm not your burden. I'm your proof. Remember that. I heard later from Megan, who was still in town, bless her brave soul, that the local church quietly removed my mother from the hospitality committee, citing personal distractions. The HOA board voted to suspend her from her leadership position pending further review, though they didn't say it was about the video. They didn't have to. And then, just when I thought I was ready to let the dust settle, the DNA company sent an update. The email subject line said, "Paternal match update," and my stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down before I opened it. I had prepared myself for confirmation. I thought it was going to say Robert was my biological father after all, that the affair story Aunt Debbie spilled had at least some basis in truth. But instead, the page loaded with a single sentence that left my head spinning. No biological relationship found. No match. No Robert. No Linda. No one. And in that moment, everything I thought I'd figured out cracked open again like an old wound splitting under pressure. If neither of them were my parents, if I wasn't the product of a home-wrecking affair, then who the hell was I? And why the hell did they lie for so long? Because now it wasn't just about exclusion or resentment or some decades-old family secret. Now it was something bigger. Something darker. Something they were still hiding. And whatever it was, I was going to find it. Even if I had to drag it out of them screaming. They landed 3 hours later than planned, sunburned and irritated, dragging their overstuffed suitcases through the arrivals terminal like they hadn't just spent a week in paradise pretending everything was perfect. I didn't pick them up from the airport, of course. I made sure someone else was stuck with that task, probably Brooke's husband or some unfortunate Uber driver who had no idea they were carting around the fractured remains of a family built on lies. I had more important things to do, things that didn't involve forcing smiles or pretending I gave a single damn about how relaxing their trip had been. The kids were already home by then, safe and sound, full of stories about pancake mornings and backyard scavenger hunts, and a blanket fort that took up an entire room. They didn't know about the chaos simmering just below the surface, and I made damn sure they wouldn't have to. They deserved better than that, they all did. As for the adults, they were walking into something a little less cozy. I'd sent out invitations a few days earlier for a welcome home dinner, a sweet little gathering to celebrate the family's return. Everyone got one. Neighbors, friends, the church ladies who used to bake banana bread and judge my hemlines. Even Aunt Debbie, who RSVP'd with a laughing emoji I could hear through the screen. They all showed up, too, curious, cautious, with that look people get when they think there might be a scandal but don't want to admit they're desperate to watch it unfold. The house smelled like pot roast and lemon bars, but underneath it all was tension so thick you could carve it like a Thanksgiving turkey. The air felt different, charged, heavy, like the whole place was holding its breath. My parents walked in last, of course. Linda in her linen pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car, Robert with his sunglasses still perched on his head like he couldn't quite let go of vacation mode. Kelsey and Brooke trailed behind, already sensing something was off but too self-absorbed to figure out what. They all smiled that tight, brittle smile people use when they know they're being watched, but have no clue what's really going on. I greeted them warmly, maybe too warmly, which should have been the first red flag. I handed out wine and hugs and made small talk like the perfect hostess, letting them believe, just for a few more minutes, that they were still in control. The kids were playing out back with Megan, who had turned into an unexpected ally, and I gathered everyone else in the living room for what I called a little family slideshow. I hooked my laptop to the big screen TV, dimmed the lights, and hit play. At first, it was all harmless nostalgia. Photos from birthdays and holidays, a few school plays, blurry pictures of kids grinning in matching pajamas. I'd even included pictures of Linda and Robert in their younger days, looking carefree and clueless, smiling like they hadn't yet learned how to lie. People cooed and laughed and leaned in until the tone started to shift. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the images turned colder. One frame showed my blank baby book, next to Kelsey's filled to the brim scrapbook. Another showed me at age 3, alone on a swing set while the rest of the family posed for Christmas card photos nearby. And then came the voice clip. The video paused. The room fell completely silent. Robert's voice played loud and clear. "Oh, you're not coming. You're not part of this. You can stay and take care of all the kids." It echoed through the speakers like a gunshot in a chapel. People shifted uncomfortably. Linda looked like she wanted to crawl under the couch. My sisters froze, mouth slightly open, trying to figure out if they should deny what they just heard or pretend they misremembered it. And then I stood up. I walked to the center of the room, looked each one of them in the eye, and said calmly, so calmly it terrified even me, "This family always told me I didn't belong. Turns out you were right. I don't. But I don't need to. Because I built my own family with honesty, loyalty, and truth. And let me tell you something, those things go a hell of a lot further than blood." I turned back to the screen. The next slide came up, a scanned court document, the official letter releasing my adoption file. Beneath that, the DNA test results, clearly stating no biological match to either Linda or Robert. Murmurs swept the room like a wave. One of the church ladies gasped. Aunt Debbie sipped her wine like it was popcorn. Then, the final image appeared, a photo of a woman around 50, standing in front of a modest house somewhere in upstate New York. She had kind eyes, dark hair pulled into a bun, and she was holding a note that read, "We've been waiting for you." I paused the slideshow there. Let it linger. Let them all take it in. "I found her," I said, my voice steady. "Her name's Celeste. She's my mother. And we've been talking. She didn't give me up because she didn't want me. She gave me up because she didn't have a choice. And now, we're meeting next month. Dead silence. My mom, I mean Linda, finally spoke, but it wasn't loud. It was barely a whisper, and it sounded more like a question than a statement. You did this? To hurt us? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. And I said, no. I did this because I was done letting you pretend I didn't exist. You built your life around hiding me. I'm just setting the record straight. The room broke after that. People started standing, whispering, glancing awkwardly at one another. My parents looked like they'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Brooke and Kelsey made some excuse and left early, dragging their husbands behind them like lifeboats off a sinking ship. The church ladies practically ran to their cars. Aunt Debbie gave me a nod as she walked out, the kind of nod you give someone who finally did the one thing everyone else was too scared to do. When the house finally emptied out and the kids were back in bed, I sat down on the couch and pulled out my phone. One new message. From a contact saved simply as Mom. It read, "We're ready when you are." I stared at it for a long moment. And then, slowly, I smiled. And this time, I didn't look back.